And this is genocide.
That's the blunt conclusion of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Today, the inquiry delivered their final report to the government.
Ideologies and instruments of colonialism, racism and misogyny, both past and present, must be rejected.
The National Inquiry was launched in 2016 and heard testimony from over 1,400 families and survivors. And it's that testimony that prompted commissioners to call the issue a genocide. This genocide has been empowered by colonial structures, evidenced notably by the Indian Act, the 60s Scoop, residential schools, and breaches of human and Inuit, Métis, and First Nations rights, leading directly to the current increased rates of violence, death, and suicide in Indigenous populations. The inquiry put forward 231 calls for justice, ranging from changes to the justice system, law enforcement, and child welfare policies. We call upon all police services to establish an independent special investigation unit for the investigation of incidents of failures to investigate, police misconduct, and all forms of discriminatory practices and mistreatment of Indigenous peoples within their police service. We call upon all governments, including Indigenous governments, to transform current child welfare systems fundamentally so that Indigenous communities have control over the design and delivery of services for their families and children. The report was handed over to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who vowed to take action.
We will conduct a thorough review of this report, and we will develop and implement a national action plan to address violence against Indigenous women, girls, and LGBTQ and Two-Spirit people.
Despite the promise, Trudeau fell short of calling the generational and systemic damage and death a genocide. That disappointed at least one commissioner.
I was hoping that he would have, that courage to put that new chapter that we are all requesting. But it's not over. Pressure.
At the end of their work, the commissioners were not able to put an exact figure on how many Indigenous women and girls are missing or murdered. That's why they feel the calls for justice are not optional.
Calls for justice are not mere recommendations or optional suggestions. They are legal imperatives. Governments must fully implement the calls for justice to ensure the safety and dignity of Indigenous women, girls, to us LGBTQIA people.
In Gatineau, Quebec, Nigel Newlove, City News.